Ashley Gatewood. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager at CFRE International, and thank you so much for joining us today for this presentation. I'm coming to you from Baltimore in the United States, and I'm really excited to be sharing this webinar with you. I have previously lived in New Zealand. I've been to Australia's FIA conference many times in BBCon, so it is a neck of the woods. It's very near and dear to me. And I am joined today by two of our CFRE ambassadors in the region, Shanthini Naidoo in Sydney and Stephanie Maitland in Auckland, and we will meet them in a couple of slides. But for now, we're going to just kick off with our presentation. There is a question pane, and you are welcome to ask any questions that you have at any point while I'm speaking. I have a few question breaks built in, and I will answer your questions then. And all questions will be treated as anonymous, so feel free to ask whatever is on your mind there. All right, so we're going to get started with some of our FAQs. One is around COVID. I know for folks in New Zealand, stuff's pretty back to normal. For those in other parts of the world and other countries, the testing centers that we use are still open, and they are following strict COVID protocols. So if you have any questions about COVID and testing, feel free to send them in the question pane and I'll address them when we talk about the exam. I'm also going to mention the test content outline, glossary, candidate handbook, and those are available on our website at cfre.org. For folks that have their CFRE application in process, or if you're going to begin one, today you will earn yourself 1 point in the non-fundraising education section for being on this webinar. And I'm going to email you a link to the recording along with a set of the slides within 24 hours. So if you would like to, in the chat box, tell us where you are joining us from, feel free if you'd like to. I know we have a lot of registrants in Australia and New Zealand. Feel free if you don't feel shy. Okay. Oh, great. We've got somebody in the U.S. Fabulous. Oh, Tasmania, Melbourne. Oh, fabulous. Oh, this is excellent. Well, it's lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. And I'll talk a little bit about who CFRE is. We are an independent nonprofit certifying body, so we're not part of any other organization. We sit alone, but we work with a number of what we call participating organizations. So these are our partner organizations. In the U.S., Association of Fundraising Professionals, Association of Healthcare Philanthropy are two of our major partners. And in the APAC region, Fundraising Institute of New Zealand, Fundraising Institute Australia, Educate Plus. You can see the others on your screen here. So what that means is that if you are a member of one of those participating organizations, you get a 20% discount on your CFRE application fee, and that applies to your initial application fee and your recertification fee. There are over 7,200 CFREs in 25 countries, and we have a growing number in Australia especially. I think we're about to hit our 100th current CFRE there. And people wonder, okay, well, what is this certification? You know, why does it matter? Well, we're the only internationally recognized accredited certification for fundraising professionals. If you live in New Zealand and you move to Australia, or you move to Fiji or Singapore, Hong Kong, the US, wherever, the CFRE carries the same weight. It means the same thing. We've been on the scene since 1981, and we serve as a third party validating your knowledge and experience. To qualify, you will need to meet 3 key requirement areas, and I'm going to dive deep into what those are a little bit down the line in a couple of slides. But essentially, it's your education, professional practice, and your professional performance. And professional performance is the funds that you've raised. So people think, okay, well, why would I do this? You know, this seems like a lot of work. I'm a really good fundraiser. I've been fundraising for 20 years without a certification. Why do I need to get this? Well, one is that we are vouching for your competence as a fundraiser, and anyone who has worked with a fundraiser who did not really have the skill set required for the job, you very easily understand why it is so important to have a certification and to actually have the body of knowledge that you say that you have. It's also credibility, right? Your hairdresser has to have a license. Your accountant has to be certified. But yet this is an industry where people don't necessarily have to have that, right? So what is the credibility? So by having this voluntary certification, you are showing people that you're invested, that you want to work to the highest standards and perform at the highest standards. Another one is career advancement. If you are up for a leadership position, if you want to change jobs and negotiate for the highest possible salary, having a certification is a huge piece of that. And as I said before, only 7,200 people worldwide have the CFRE. When you're a CFRE, that matters because it's not a dime a dozen certification. When you go to apply for a job, you may be the only CFRE applying. And therefore, you get all of that great, what I would call certification shine for being the person that has gone this extra mile. Your commitment to the sector, obviously, there is a huge churn in fundraising, and that is risky for nonprofits. It's risky for our sectors, right? We want people that are in this profession for the long haul, that are committed to it. So when someone's hiring, when you're bringing somebody onto a team, right, they want to know that they're learning from somebody who takes their career very seriously and is highly invested. And so having a certification embodies that commitment. Also recognition, we all like to be recognized for our achievements, and the CFRE gives you that validation. And then personal satisfaction. We've had a ton of CFREs tell us, oh my gosh, this was one of the best personal and professional things that I ever did. I felt so great about it, and I'm so happy I did it. And accountability and ethics, you can see on your screen here, I just grabbed all of these off the internet a week or so ago. These things are top of mind. The scandals, they do get column space. They are shared articles. They are things that people are reading, whether that's your donors, your grant makers, your board members. People want to know that you as a fundraiser value accountability and ethics. And it's really easy to go out there and say, oh yeah, of course I'm an ethical fundraiser. Personally, I used to work for a nonprofit where somebody in the fundraising department stole $1.5 to $4 million, and we still don't know the entire amount. This was about 12 years ago. So for me, right, I've been in that experience. And for anyone who's worked in a nonprofit where something has gone pear-shaped like that, it does really stay at the forefront of your mind. You want to believe in your coworkers. You want to know that they are operating ethically. So having a certification where you are showing that you know best practice ethical fundraising and you have agreed to abide by the Donor Bill of Rights as part of that certification is really important. It looks like maybe somebody's having a little trouble with the audio. You may want to close out and try to come back in, and there might also be a dial-in phone number. So now I'm going to turn this over to our fantastic CFRE in Sydney. Shanthini, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ashley. Yes, so my name's Shanthini Naidoo, and I'm currently the CEO of the St Vincent's Curran Foundation in Sydney. We are the fundraising organisation for St Vincent's Hospitals in New South Wales. And yeah, so I have probably almost 20 years experience in fundraising and leadership. So what motivated me to become a CFRE? I really wanted to formalise that experience. As Ashley has said, I feel that the accreditation really reinforces your commitment. It demonstrates your commitment to the profession of fundraising. I think it's almost showing respect for the profession of fundraising. I think it's quite important when you are recruiting staff to a team in terms of setting the standards for how you expect team members to work from a fundraising perspective, whether it's making sure that they're, understanding why policy and procedure is important, or why certain systems are in place to avoid fraud. And like Ashley mentioned, that's the worst possible example. I live in fear of something like that happening, Ashley. And a lot of my engagement with the CFRE process has actually come from, when I've visited conferences in the United States and visited colleagues in the United States, and where I really got to understand the value of the CFRE. So in Australia, I think, it's something that we need to look at to make sure that we're being international best practice. So that's what made me look at the actual doing it. It took me a long time to come to doing it, and now that I've done it, I would have actually considered, I regret it. I think I should have done it earlier, because I only did it about, I don't know, 2 years ago, I suppose. I think it's worthwhile probably doing it at mid-career level, when you've got enough experience. So it took me about 6 to 8 hours for the application itself. So you apply to then be able to sit the exam. And to do that, I went through my CV. It actually took a bit of time because you have to fill out quite a lot of information to meet the points system. And you can use education criteria that is recent in your recent career history. So in my case, I'd just done a leadership certificate, but it was at an accredited, Harvard, so that was acceptable. And obviously other universities or accepted courses. One of the things that you do get points for is if you've done recent conference presentations using new materials, and also for conferences that you'd attended. So, use your CV and also maybe your recent performance reviews at work, because that helps to jog your memory to help fill out the application. So the application itself, you need to set some time. And, in doing so, you might find, a couple of times I had looked at it previously, I realised that I would need to do a bit more work to get the criteria across. So it's good to have a look at the application early.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Shanthini. And now Stephanie Maitland, who is our New Zealand CFRE ambassador.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. So yes, my name is Stephanie Maitland, in Auckland and the bottom of the world. And I'm a fundraising consultant. So I've been fundraising for close to 30 years now, and self-employed for 17 and a half, coming up 18 years. And I work with charities of all size budgets across New Zealand, advising on or doing their fundraising. So in regards to what motivated me to become a CFRE, I became a CFRE many years ago. First in 1998, I became a CFRE. And the main reason was the career pathway. I was committed to fundraising as a career, and it was good to have that certification to get that validation, that confirmation of what I thought I knew was that I knew, that basically I knew what I was doing. And certainly I really wanted to grow fundraising as a profession in New Zealand. The Fundraising Institute of New Zealand had only launched in 1991 here in New Zealand, so it was still relatively new. Fundraising, people certainly didn't grow up and say, mummy, I want to be a fundraiser. So we needed to grow fundraising as a profession in New Zealand. the more people who could become a CFRE and get that international certification was important. So certainly wanted to do what I could to help grow fundraising as a profession in New Zealand. And as I said, to get that validation, that confirmation that I did know what I was doing. So my CFRE process, I actually won an award that had a cash prize that had to be used to develop my career. I had a manager at the time who was a CFRE, and he was very keen that I too applied to become a CFRE. So he very kindly gave me some time off for study leave, and I was able to start the process of becoming a CFRE. Things were a little bit different in my day. You had to fill in a form, and it took a little bit tough time to do that. Certainly echo what was said previously around trying to go back to see what fundraising I had done for the last 5 years and how much money I had raised and how I had done that and what conferences and things that I had attended, and get the and work all that through to get the points in next section to be able to go to the next section. So it certainly took a little while to do that, and I certainly encourage you to start that process now, and you can do it all online and keep track as you go, which makes it so much easier. Yeah, as I said, fill in the online application form regularly. I couldn't sit the exam in New Zealand at the time. I had to fly to Australia and use this time for the flight, the 3.5-hour flight, to continue to read the books around that were recommended for the CFRE, and thankfully the flight was late and we had to circle around Sydney for another half an hour, which gave me extra time to make sure I had read the books before landing and then sitting the exam.
Excellent. Well, now we have, I think there's 12 or 15 test centers around New Zealand, so that won't be an issue for folks doing it now.
Exactly. Thankfully, things have moved on from when I did it. Makes it so much easier.
All right. Great. Thank you both so much. And I will go ahead and jump into how to get started. So if you haven't started your application yet, it's very easy to do so. We have 2 places on the homepage of our website that you can see on our screen. Click either one of those and you can start. It's totally free to begin your application. You only pay when you want to submit it. So if you're still thinking, I don't know if I want to do this or not, I'm just going to weigh it up, that's totally fine. But you can go ahead and start the application, have a look, start logging your information if you like. And just for bandwidth, I did turn my webcam off. So for the application, you will just go ahead and submit it whenever you feel like you've completed all of the pieces. If it takes you a week to fill it out, if it takes you 2 years to fill it out, that's totally fine. It's on your own timeline. The cost of it is, at the regular cost, is $875 US. And if you're a member of FINS, FIA, Educate Plus, any other participating organization, you get the $700 US rate. It's very common that people have their employer pay for part or all of that cost. So if you are coming up on the end of a financial year, maybe March or June, and there's going to be some professional development money left over, you may want to have that conversation with your boss and say, hey, there's going to be some money left over, especially if for folks who didn't travel to a conference this year, right? Maybe there's a little bit of extra wiggle room in there, and you can have your employer help you out with that. And I always tell people that money really comes back to you. I think people think, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. I don't know if I want to outlay that. And that's understandable. But the thing is, if it's going to help you go to your next position and be able to negotiate, let's say even an extra 5,000 New Zealand dollars or an extra 4,000 Australian dollars, that's paid for itself, right? So that's the best way that I always try and tell people to look at it, is that this really is an investment in you, and that will come back to you. I mean, if you told me the name of a stock I could buy for $700 and it was going to earn me several $1,000s every year for the rest of my working life, I would be like, please get my stockbroker on the phone. Let's do this. So for the education requirement, we do have 80 points are required. And I know people go, okay, well, thanks, Ashley, but what's the point? So I'll get into that in just a slide. But the points need to be earned within the past 5 years. And so essentially today, we're looking at everything from 2015 forward. When we hit January 1 of 2021, we're going to be looking at everything from January 1, 2016 onwards. So if you've done a bunch of conferences, webinars, yada, yada in 2015, just know that they're going to expire for the purposes of your CFRE application on January 1, 2016. If you did a bunch of education in 2015, you may want to submit your application before the end of the year. That's a really common thing that people do before their education is going to expire. They say, you know what, I did a bunch of stuff in the year that's going to expire and I need to get this application in. Most people earn their points through attending conferences, workshops, seminars, webinars, and 1 hour equals 1 point. Whatever you're doing for an education standpoint, it needs to be at least 45 minutes. So if you go to a conference and it's got those like little 15-minute, like fast little breakout things, that is not going to count, right? It needs to be at least 45 minutes. All right. I see we have a question here about academic degrees, and I'm going to get to that in a slide or two and explain how you can get points for those. So if you present at conferences, workshops, etc., you get 2 points per hour that you're presenting, right? So you get 1 hour equals 1 point as an attendee and 2 points per hour when you present existing material. And then when you present new material, so the first time you give a new presentation, that's 3 points per hour. And if you ever author articles or books, you can also get points for that, but they cannot be self-published. So academic degrees can exceed the 5-year time frame. That is the only education that can exceed the 5-year time frame. That's bachelor's, master's, PhD. In the US, we have associate's degrees. And that's any year, any major, right? Personally, I have an English degree from 2002. That's my bachelor's. My master's is in advertising 2005. I'm going to get 10 points for each of those. You don't have to have a degree to become a CFRE, so if you don't have one, don't worry about it. And we can take up to a maximum of 40 points from those degrees. So if you have 6 PhDs, I'm incredibly impressed. However, unfortunately, we can only give you credit. 10 points would be for 4 of them, right? So that never expires. Now, the other kinds of education we have, one is service learning. And that's essentially volunteering. And we give you 1 point per year per organization that you volunteer with. And there's no maximum or minimum amount of time for that. So if you do a beach cleanup for 2 weekends, that's 1 point per year per org. If you walk dogs at your animal shelter in your neighborhood 3 days a week for 50 weeks a year, it's 1 point per year per organization. Now, if you serve in a volunteer leadership role, so you're on a board or a committee at a nonprofit, you get 2 points per year per org, and we can take up to 10 points for your volunteering. All right. Now, there are so many great courses out there that are not related to fundraising, but that will help you in your role. So that might be a leadership course. It might be an Excel course. It could be, how to communicate with different generations in the workforce. And we can give you up to 10 points for those. We do get people being really a little cheeky, right? We've had people that have tried to submit chocolate making courses, people trying to submit yoga for fundraisers. They don't have any, we really can't draw a line, right, to that and your ability to fundraise or be a better manager or professional, right? So the chocolate making course sounds delicious, but we can't count that. And you get 1 hour equals 1 point, the exact same in the non-fundraising education, just like it was for the fundraising education. And if you present non-fundraising education, so somebody came to me, true story, and said, I'm a swim coach, can I get points for that? No, you cannot. We can only give you points if you present fundraising education. A lot of people have questions. They go on a course and they think, does it qualify? And I mentioned that we have a test content outline, which I'll talk more in depth about. If it ladders up to something on there, then yep, absolutely. But honestly, if it's related to fundraising, it's pretty much going to be okay. This also includes Razor's Edge training. So if you use that product, there can be points awarded for that as well because of the database fundraising side of that comes into play. And then you want to make sure you document the exact amount of time that you were in a conference or a class. So for instance, if you went to the Fabulous Fins conference that just happened earlier this month, you might think, oh my gosh, well, there was, 7 hours it was 7 hours a day or 6 hours a day, whatever it was. I'm going to get 6 points because it was a 6-hour program that day. Well, it's not, because we have to subtract out breaks and award events and lunches and exhibit hall visits and all of that. So usually when you go to a conference, after you subtract out all of the breaks, it usually is, maybe 4.5 to 5.5 hours of actual instruction. So if you want to calculate this, it's super easy. Just grab the agenda and subtract out whatever the breaks are. If you don't have the agenda from a past event, you would be very surprised. A lot of conference websites, stay up for 6 months after the event before they get refreshed. You might be able to pull from, something you attended earlier in 2020, or contact the event organizer. This is really not new to them. They get requests like this all the time. And then ask yourself if the presentation, if you want to get points for presenting, if it was related to your employment. If it was related to your employment, it can't count. So what I mean by that is if you present something to your board, that doesn't count because that's you doing your job, right? That's not you making a presentation to a wider body of fundraisers. So if you presented a webinar, seminar, masterclass, that is the kind of thing that is going to count. Now, professional practice, this is you working. And the requirement here is 36 points, and 1 month equals 1 point. So essentially you need to have worked for 36 months out of the last 5 years. So we do give you wiggle room if maternity leave, medical leave, you were made redundant and you were unemployed for a while, we totally understand. So you will need to have the 3-year requirement met. And at least 50% of your full-time duties must, if you work full-time, 50% of your duties must be fundraising related. So if you wear the PR hat half the time and the fundraising hat half the time, that's perfectly fine. I know not so much in the US, but in Australia, New Zealand, other corners of the world, people don't always have to work 40 hours a week, and you're very lucky. When I first started working in New Zealand, I worked 32 hours a week, and it was lovely. So, and that's fine. But at that point, if you're going to work 20 hours a week, you do need to have 100% of your time be related to fundraising. Now, the third piece here is the professional performance, and this is you fundraising. Now, these points, again, we're going to go back 5 years. And the way that it works is 1 point equals 25,000 US dollars. And I know people go, well, why is this in US dollars? And it's because we're accredited. So we have to have one standard dollar amount globally. We can't have some people submitting their applications in euros, and some people submitting their applications in Thai baht, and some people in yen, right? We have to just have one dollar amount that is relevant to everybody. So we have a little calculator inside the application that will help you with this. So the other thing is, if you're in a smaller shop or for whatever reason you feel like you cannot meet this points requirement, you can earn points through management and communications projects. And you can see here that they're each worth 5 points, and we have examples on our website. So I just don't want anyone to think that because they're in a smaller shop that they would not be able to attain their CFRE. We do have ways that you can earn these points. I have a few questions or tips here about how to document things. I had a nice question come in about how do you prove that you went to the sessions in a conference. And what you would do is you would keep your agenda, and you actually, for a conference, you don't have to tell us every session that you went to, right? In the application, what you would do, say for instance, you went to the FIA conference this year. you would put an FAA conference 2020, and where it says speakers in the application, you would just write various, and then you'd put the full points amount. We do audit 10% of the applications. So what that means is if you are audited, we would need to see that agenda, and hopefully you have a receipt or other proof that you paid or that you attended. Most people do use the payment receipt or the email confirmation of registration for that. If you do get audited, and I just want to say, don't worry about it at all. Our certification team will work hand in hand with you to make sure you have everything that you need. It's not a scary process. I always recommend that you want to keep all of your documentation for everything you've attended in your personal email. We have had a number of people call our office freaking out because they changed jobs and they're in the first week of their new job and they realize all their CFRE proof is in an email at an old job. So make sure that you forward those event agendas, those receipts to your own little, I call it, if you want to start a folder and just label it CFRE proof and have everything go in there. A few other application tips. So you heard Shanthini and Stephanie talk about, it took them a few hours to do their application. If you don't want to sit and spend 8 hours on one day on the application, I totally understand. You can jump in and out of that application as much as you want. The other thing is, if you're still working towards those point requirements, right, like education, you're still going on webinars, conferences, etc. Every time you attend something, jump back into your CFRE application and log it. That's really important because I have people tell me, oh, I do it at the end of the year. And it's like, okay, well, if you miss a few email confirmations for webinars that you went on, you could be losing out on points, right? Unless your memory is really amazing. So feel free to update that application as you go. Now, we're going to email you your confirmation when you become a CFRE, and we're going to mail a hard copy of your CFRE certificate to you. So make sure that at all times that contact information is up to date in your CFRE application, because when you move house, probably the last thing you're thinking about is updating your CFRE application, but you don't want your certificate to get sent to some place you lived 3 years ago. You may want to add a few extra points. So our application system does let you add in extra points. I run a webinar all about the CFRE application, and that'll be coming up in the new year. But once you start your application and you go in, it's really, really intuitive. So just have a look. Like I said, it doesn't cost you anything to start it. And don't guess. We really would prefer that you contact us with your questions. We see kind of random things in applications where you can tell people just were like, I don't know what to do here. Let me just write the words TBD, and then they submit their application and we don't know what you're referring to. So if you get stuck at any point, we're mega, mega responsive. Feel free to contact us. If you feel like you want to seriously pursue your CFRE, it's well worth having a conversation with your boss. As I mentioned before, they might be open to covering part or all of that fee for you. But, a really important thing about why your boss would want you to earn that certification is that you're setting an example for people that you manage. You are managing people, they are looking up to you, especially with Gen Z and millennials. They want people who can really put their money where their mouth is and know how to do their job. And a lot of people tell us that while studying for the CFRE exam, and the CFRE exam we'll get into in a few minutes here, but that they learned something and the next week they went and they applied it to a campaign they were working on. That is really, really common. People say, oh my gosh, while studying, I learned so many useful things and I began using them straight away at my job. And if your fiscal year isn't going to necessarily have any dollars in it for you, you may want to ask your boss if they could put some funds aside in the next fiscal year to support you on this journey. Now, also you can tell your boss not a lot of people have a qualification. So when you're talking to major donors, you're talking to grant makers, you can tell them a third party is validating your experience and they should feel very confident in working with you. And ethics and accountability have never been more vital, right? We saw on that slide with all of those crazy headlines, you know, no charity wants to be in the headlines for the wrong reasons. So having a certification only gives everybody more peace of mind that you're an ethical, accountable fundraising professional. So we've come to our first question break, and we've had some questions roll in, and if you have any, feel free to submit them. Someone asks, I have started the online application form, and I wonder how long does the application stay open? Is there a time constraint? There is not a time constraint at all. So once you start it, it's fine until you go ahead and submit it. So yeah, there's nothing like that, but do keep in mind that anything, you know, the education and the professional practice and professional performance are good for the most recent 5 years. So if you put in a bunch of stuff from 2016 and you don't submit your application for 3 years, that's going to expire and it's going to slide off. And then we have a question. Do you think the CFRE is beneficial for mid to upper middle management levels, as not everyone has their eye on a top CEO style or a senior role within an organization? That's an excellent question. I would say it absolutely does, because you're not necessarily even just getting the certification to move up in your career, right? Part of it is because you want to make sure that you have the best fundraising knowledge, the most current best practice, globally recognized fundraising knowledge that you can implement at your job. So regardless of your career ambitions, that's going to be really important. And again, for the people that you manage, when you're hiring people and you have conversations, people want to work for somebody who is a qualified professional. So yeah, that's a fabulous question. All right, now we have a couple of dates coming up. Have a look at this slide, and I'll walk you through it. So we have 4 test windows throughout the year. You can see them on your screen here, and that's when the exam is available to you. So you can't sit for the exam every day of the year. It is within these test windows. And the deadline, if you want to sit for the exam in that test window, is the first day of the test window. So that'll make more sense if you're looking at the slide, right? So if I want to sit for the exam on February 1, I need to have my application in by January 15th. Now, if you want to sit the exam January 16th, I do not recommend submitting it on the 15th, because we're going to need a few days to review it, and we need to send you an email with the instructions of how to schedule your exam. But, you know, we do turn applications around usually in about 2 to 4 business days. And once we have approved your application, you have 1 year to sit the exam. So today is October 27th. If I submit my application today, or sorry, October 28th for my friends on the other side of the world, that would mean that you would have until October 27th of 2021 to sit for the exam. And you'll notice we have no testing in December. So if you submit your application on December 20th, you're actually going to have till November 30th of the following year. All right. Now, we've had some other questions come in, and we will have another question break, so I will be sure to address those then. The testing centers are all over the place, and this is just for Sydney. So if you go to pearsonview.com/CFRE and type in your postal code, you will be able to see all of the testing center locations around you. This company has them all over the place. So major cities in Australia, like I said, they're all over in New Zealand. I think it's really weird in New Zealand. There's not one in Dunedin, but there's one in Invercargill, which I'm not quite sure why. But at any rate, so there is usually one pretty close by. Now, there are COVID-19 updates on the Pearson VUE website. So if you go there, you can see it's the same URL, pearsonview.com/CFRE. And they will tell you, they'll give you this hyperlink there, and you can go over and see if there are any COVID-19 updates affecting where you are taking your exam. Now, a lot of people wonder, a lot of people are scared about the exam. And if that's you, you can raise your hand because no one can see you. It's fine. But don't be afraid of it. It's 200 multiple choice questions. There are no open-ended questions. So the correct answer is looking right at you. The exam is developed by our exam committee, which has people from all over the world on it, including the APAC region. And it's global. So whether you sit for this exam in Perth, Shanghai, Auckland, it's all the same exam no matter where in the world you sit for it. And the scores range from 200 to 800. 500 is passing, and the scores are weighted. If you're interested in that, there's more information on our website. The psychometric part of it is a little out of the scope of today's webinar. And you're going to have 4 hours to sit for it. So people hear that and they're like, oh, geez. Well, we get all of the data back from the test center, and the majority of people take between 3 hours and 15 minutes and 3.5 hours to sit for the exam. You are more than likely, if you keep yourself moving, going to have time to look over your answers. You can move backwards and forwards inside the exam, which is super cool, because if you get really hung up on question 17, question 99 might jog your memory about it, and you can just scoot on back to question 17 and answer it. So it's a very fair exam. We give you plenty of time, and the pass rate is about 80%. So we're going to do a breakdown of a question here, and I'll read this out, and you'll have a few seconds to think on it. So this is not on the actual exam, but it is a practice exam question. What considerations must be made when accepting a non-cash gift? So securities, properties, etc. 1, the likelihood of the property being sold for cash. 2, the value of the gift and tax implications of accepting it. 3, the gift's appropriateness relative to the organization's gift acceptance policy. Or 4, the timing of the gift relative to the annual campaign. All right. So I also want to say, if you don't select the correct answer, I don't want you to be scared for the actual CFRE exam. I want you to think that that means this is a good motivator for me to delve a bit deeper into some of the best practice fundraising recommendations out there. The correct answer is 3, and that is because your gift acceptance policy is really the holy grail of what you can and cannot accept. So for instance, if your gift acceptance policy says you can't accept any money from or anything from tobacco manufacturers, and then, you know, Philip Morris or some cigarette manufacturer wants to give you $1 million, you're not able to, right? Because your gift acceptance policy says that that's not okay. Now, the exam is divided into these 6 knowledge domains. And if you look at your screen, you'll see we're really transparent up front about the number of questions and the percent of the exam that they make up. But securing the gift and relationship building really make up the bulk of the exam. We have the test content outline on our website. And what I recommend that you do is print this off. It's also going to be in the follow-up email I send. And I want you to highlight anything that you feel like you can't feel confident in answering an exam question on. Once you highlight those, you'll note if they are clustered in, you know, maybe 1 or 2 domains, or they're all over the board. And then that's going to inform what you read off the resource reading list. So the resource reading list is 14 books, and you're only going to read 1 to 3. So you're only going to read what needs to address any gaps in fundraising knowledge that you have. You can borrow these books, you know, if you don't want to outlay the money, we totally understand. A lot of libraries will order these in if they don't already have them. A lot of people ask their employers to purchase them for the team, so you wouldn't own it, right? You would study from it, and then afterwards it would be available to your coworkers. And up here we have where the knowledge domains addressed are. So this is when you've decided, okay, you know, it looks like knowledge domain 3, or, you know, whatever is where I need to spend some study time. This is how you'll know which books to pick. And we've had one question come in about, is the exam tailored to the US? It is absolutely not. It is a global exam There are no tax questions on it at all. So you're not going to be asked anything at all that's US or North American centric at all on this exam. Everything is global best practice. So it will apply as much in Australia as it will in Argentina. All right, now how to know what to study. So like I said, you're going to review the test content outline and be really honest with yourself about what you're comfortable with. The exam is about best practice. It's not a rote memorization of facts. We're not asking you to memorize definitions or legal jargon. You know, it's nothing like that. This is all really practical information. And we have a number of online resources that you can use to get your study underway. And we also have a paid resource here, the practice exam. If you don't want to use it, that's totally fine. I only recommend use the practice exam if you have test anxiety, or if you really, after looking at the test content outline, think, geez Louise, I have no idea what I know and what I don't know. Like, this is just too much for me to try and ascertain. The practice exam has a bank of questions, 100 questions, and you will take those questions and it will show you what you got wrong and it will let you know where you need to study. Again, totally optional. People pass the exam constantly without ever laying eyes on that. So if you don't want to do it, that's fine. And then we also have a new Exam Compass study guide that came out in April. And that, again, that is a paid resource. It's $50 US. It's available on Amazon. Again, you do not need it to study, but if you want that support, that is a resource for you there. So to prepare a study plan, you're going to pick days of the week and set a time each of those days if that works for you. I think when people say I'm going to study when I have free time, it's a very dangerous deal to make with yourself. And then you're going to know the knowledge domains you're going to focus on, and you're going to select those books from the resource reading list. And then I love the idea of a page goal each week, especially 50 pages a week, because what is that? That is 7 pages a day. 7 pages a day is very, very doable, right? So don't feel overwhelmed. And it sounds obvious to have a quiet, calm study area, but that's not always at home. And in this COVID world, that's, you know, you may not have many options for where to study, but really do try to keep the distractions to a minimum so you can absorb everything. This is a picture on your screen right now, a little bit about what the average testing center looks like. There are very strict COVID protocols in place. You will have to wear a mask. There's hand sanitizer. There's distancing. I think they have people at every other station right now. There are security cameras, and you, like I said, you have these individual test stations. Now, after you finish the exam, right in the test center, you're going to get your score, and you'll know straight away if you were successful or not. If you're successful, you will get an email notice from us the next business day. And if you are not successful, you will get an email from us with information about retaking the exam. But there is a 30-day stand down period, so you will have to wait to reschedule that. There is a $375, that's US dollar, fee to retake the exam. And somebody said to me, gosh, Ashley, that's a lot of money. I'm going to spend over $1,000 to do this. And this will, I mean, if you pass the exam the first time, you're only paying the $700 initial application fee, right? That $375 is really a deterrent because we want you to pass the first time and you want to pass the first time. And then at the end of each testing window, we will mail your certificate to you. So they don't come immediately. You know, people think I passed on a Monday and my certificate will be there Friday, but we do them in batches. So now we're going to return to Shanthini, and she's going to tell us her awesome wisdom for the Cfree exam and how she prepared for it.
I'm not going to actually tell you my result. Yes, so it's quite unusual, obviously, because you know, I set textbooks, as Ashley said, but what I really spent the time on was familiarizing myself with the CFRE test content outline, because that as a guide and then doing the practice exam online was really useful. I also joined through CFRE and other sort of, you know, fundraising institutions some fundraising forums online, because that brought up some, you know, the ability to see what people were talking about and ask questions in my preparation, including the CFRE fundraising forum, just reading current philanthropy and fundraising newsletters. I actually reread one of the textbooks called Strategic Fund Development, which is one of the books that was recommended, which I found really useful in just refreshing my memory of all the different aspects of fundraising, not just any specialist areas that you might specialize in. So you do need to be familiar across a broad range. I was nervous because I was concerned about these differences in the US terminology and approaches to the ones here in Australia. I mean, doing the practice exam really helped with that, as I said. And yeah, I would say I spent probably about 30 hours, mainly rereading the Strategic Fund Development book and doing the practice exams. The practice exam, I think, was the most valuable study tool for me, because it really prepared you for when you're in the exam environment and probably feeling a little bit isolated in a test center, but you know, so that having done the multiple choice online a few times gave you the sense of having to really focus on the actual question, and reading that properly is really important. So yeah, that's over.
Thank you. Very good advice there. And Stephanie?
I found completing the application form harder than actually sitting the exam. So the exam was quite straightforward. So some tips was to find a study buddy or two. You know, find someone else that you get to sit in the exam with you, set up a time to study. You'll encourage each other to make sure you meet the deadline, you don't cancel out, things like that. So find yourself a study buddy. There are a lot of free study resources that Ashley's referred to on the CFRE website that definitely were not available when I did it, and there are lots, those resources are really, really useful. There's also the CFRE Open Forum that's on CFRE Central that Ashley will be able to help you with, and you can talk to other people who are looking to sit the exam or have sat the exam, and you can get their tips and tricks as well. And chat with the CFRE ambassador. They're in New Zealand and Australia and other parts of the world, and for their advice about what they did and how they can assist you and support you to through the process of filling in the forms, preparing for the exam, sitting the exam, and then celebrating when you win.
Thank you both for that advice. And thank you, Stephanie, for mentioning CFRE Central. So once you start your application, you're automatically going to get access to our free online community. And there are people in there all the time saying, hey, I'm in wherever, and I'm looking for a study buddy. Somebody contact me if you're interested. Or people will say, is anybody selling such and such book? I'd like to buy it. Or how did you study? And if you go back really far back in those threads, there's a really good one about some people wrote who did not pass the exam, and they talked about how they studied and how they thought they studied wrong. So that information is really crucial, so you can learn from other people. Now, once you become a CFRE, right, because that happens, I'm going to snap my fingers. Maybe that came through the audio. Hopefully it did. So once you are a CFRE, you pass your exam, that's when you're a CFRE. And once you become that CFRE, that is when you have 3 years, essentially until you recertify again. So the big difference between our certification and diploma courses or other offerings in this space is that you have to keep re-upping it. And people say, well, I think this is kind of pointless. I've passed the exam. I've shown you I've known what I know. And then I always use myself as an example. like I said, I have a master's in advertising from 2005. How much has changed in the last 15 years, right? Social media, podcasts, all of these things. If we have a diploma or a certificate, it's just a snapshot that we knew something at that one moment in time. When we have a certification that we have to renew, that shows that we are continuing to invest in our knowledge and we are staying current and sharp, right? And that's what your employer wants. That's what your donors want. That's what your grant makers want. So we have the recertification every 3 years. It's an online application and it's the same 3 areas: education, professional practice, and professional performance. The recertification fee is $510 US or $408 US for participating organization member. Many people just get this built into their next work contract. You know that it's coming, right? If you become a Cfre in 2021 and you shift jobs in 2023, you think, okay, next year I've got to re-up my Cfre. When you're negotiating, have that conversation. And I also think it's really good because you'll also get a good sense of how much that organization values professional development, right? So if you feel comfortable, many people that just get that built into their contract. And there's no exam for recertification. You will just take that exam once, and as long as you don't lapse, you're all good. And the recertification, you can see on your screen the points here, and I do want to point out the 30 points in professional practice. So you're probably thinking, okay, that means I need to work 30 months in that 3-year time frame. If you are out of work for longer than that, especially for maternity leave or you're unemployed for 9 months, whatever, just reach out to us. We will work with you. We do not want you're not going to lose your CFRE because you're out on maternity or medical leave or something like that. So we're very fair about that. And we have 2 of our fabulous ambassadors on the line with us today, and we have ambassadors all over the world. So you can email me at share, and I'll do an email introduction between you and one of those people, and you can talk to them and pick their brains about how they studied, how they discussed this with their employer. All right. Well, we are just at time here, and it doesn't look like we have any unanswered questions in the question pane. So I want to thank Shanthini and Stephanie. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you everyone for joining us on the line. And you will receive a link to the recording of this as well as the slides and other materials within 24 hours. If you don't see it, please check your spam filter. And if you don't see it there, you can go ahead and I'll go back. You can just email me at share@cfre.org. That is my email address at CFRE. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Take care, be well, and we look forward to reviewing your application.
Thanks, Ashley. Bye.
Thanks, Ashley.
Take care.